Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa, launched on June 22, 1941, stands as one of the most significant and ambitious military campaigns of World War II. Initiated by Nazi Germany against the Soviet Union, this operation marked the beginning of a brutal and costly conflict on the Eastern Front. It was named after Frederick Barbarossa, the medieval Holy Roman Emperor, symbolizing German expansionist ambitions. Background and strategic objectives. Adolf Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union was driven by a mix of ideological, political, and strategic motivations. His ideology, rooted in Mein Kampf, espoused a vision of Lebensraum, living space, in the East. The vast territories of the Soviet Union, rich in natural resources and fertile lands, were seen as vital for the sustenance and expansion of the Aryan race. Politically, Hitler viewed communism as a direct threat to his fascist ideology. The Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact of 1939 had been a temporary measure, allowing Germany to secure its western flank before turning eastward. By 1941, with much of Western Europe under German control, Hitler believed the time was ripe to dismantle the Soviet Union. Strategically, the invasion aimed to eliminate the Soviet threat before the United States, perceived as an eventual adversary, could fully mobilize its industrial and military might. Hitler sought a quick victory, expecting the Soviet Union to collapse under the weight of a swift, decisive blow, similar to the blitzkrieg tactics that had overwhelmed Western Europe. Planning and preparation. Operation Barbarossa was meticulously planned, involving the largest invasion force in history. Over 3 million Axis troops, including German, Romanian, Finnish, Hungarian, and Italian forces, amassed along a 1,800-mile front. The invasion was divided into 3 army groups. Army Group North, commanded by Field Marshal Wilhelm von Lieb, aimed to capture Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, and secure the Baltic region. Army Group Center, under Field Marshal Fedor von Bock, targeted Moscow, the political and administrative heart of the Soviet Union. Army Group South, led by Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, was tasked with seizing Ukraine, with its agricultural and industrial resources. The German High Command underestimated the Red Army's resilience and the logistical challenges posed by the vast Soviet terrain. Nonetheless, confidence was high, fueled by previous victories in Poland and France. The invasion begins. At dawn on June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa commenced with a massive artillery barrage and aerial bombardment. The Luftwaffe targeted Soviet airfields, crippling the Red Air Force and gaining air superiority. Simultaneously, German armored divisions spearheaded deep penetrations into Soviet territory, supported by mechanized infantry and artillery. The initial phase of the invasion saw staggering successes. Soviet defenses were caught off guard, and the German blitzkrieg tactics led to rapid advances. Key cities like Minsk and Smolensk fell quickly, and vast numbers of Soviet troops were encircled and captured in massive pockets known as kessels. Despite these early victories, the German advance began to encounter significant challenges. The Soviet Union's sheer size and harsh terrain impeded logistical support, straining supply lines. Moreover, the Soviet military, though initially disorganized, began to regroup and mount fierce resistance. The Battle for Moscow. As Army Group Center pushed toward Moscow, the importance of the Soviet capital became evident. Capturing Moscow was expected to deliver a psychological blow to Soviet morale and disrupt their command structure. However, as the Germans neared the city, the advance slowed. The onset of the Russian winter in October 1941 caught the Germans unprepared. Tanks and vehicles struggled in the mud and snow, while soldiers, inadequately clothed for the cold, suffered frostbite and exposure. The Soviet defense, bolstered by fresh reinforcements and fortified positions, stiffened. The Battle of Moscow, lasting from October 1941 to January 1942, marked a turning point. Soviet counteroffensives, led by General Georgy Zhukov, exploited German weaknesses, pushing them back from the outskirts of the city. The failure to capture Moscow shattered the myth of German invincibility and marked the beginning of a protracted, brutal conflict on the Eastern Front. Stalingrad and the turning tide. While Operation Barbarossa initially achieved significant territorial gains, the tide began to turn against the Germans with the Battle of Stalingrad, August 1942 to February 1943. Stalingrad, an industrial city on the Volga River, became a focal point of intense urban combat. The battle was marked by its ferocity and high casualties on both sides. Soviet forces, determined to defend the city at all costs, engaged in brutal house-to-house fighting. The harsh winter and extended supply lines further strained German capabilities. In November 1942, the Soviets launched Operation Uranus, a massive counteroffensive that encircled and trapped the German Sixth Army. Despite orders from Hitler to hold their ground, the encircled forces, under General Friedrich Paulus, eventually surrendered in February 1943. The defeat at Stalingrad was a catastrophic blow to German morale and marked the beginning of a sustained Soviet offensive. Impact and consequences. Operation Barbarossa had profound and far-reaching consequences for the course of World War II and the post-war world. The invasion shattered any remaining illusions of German invincibility and marked the Soviet Union as a central player in the Allied war effort. The Eastern Front became a theater of immense suffering and devastation. The conflict resulted in some of the highest casualties of the war, with millions of soldiers and civilians perishing. The brutality of the fighting, combined with harsh environmental conditions and the widespread destruction of infrastructure, left deep scars on the Soviet landscape and its people. Strategically, the failure of Operation Barbarossa forced Germany into a protracted war of attrition, for which it was ill-prepared. The immense resources and manpower of the Soviet Union, coupled with the increasing involvement of the United States and the United Kingdom, stretched German capabilities to the breaking point. The Eastern Front after Barbarossa. Following the failure of Operation Barbarossa, the Eastern Front remained a focal point of intense and protracted combat. The Soviets launched a series of counteroffensives, gradually reclaiming lost territory. Key battles, such as the Siege of Leningrad, the Battle of Kursk, and the liberation of Kiev, highlighted the shifting momentum in favor of the Red Army. The Siege of Leningrad, lasting from September 1941 to January 1944, was one of the longest and most destructive sieges in history. Despite severe hardships, including starvation and relentless bombardment, the city's defenders held out, symbolizing Soviet resilience. The Battle of Kursk, July-August 1943, marked another pivotal moment. It was the largest tank battle in history, with both sides deploying massive armored forces. The Soviet victory at Kursk ended German offensive capabilities on the Eastern Front and initiated a series of Soviet advances that would eventually lead to the liberation of Eastern Europe. Conclusion. Operation Barbarossa was a monumental gamble that ultimately failed, with profound consequences for Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. The invasion marked the beginning of a brutal and devastating conflict on the Eastern Front, characterized by immense human suffering and strategic significance. The failure of Barbarossa exposed the limitations of German military might and underscored the resilience and capacity of the Soviet Union. The Eastern Front became the decisive theater of World War II, shaping the outcome of the conflict in the post-war world. The legacy of Operation Barbarossa serves as a stark reminder of the horrors of war and the dangers of totalitarian ambitions. It stands as a testament to the resilience of the Soviet people and the strategic miscalculations that can alter the course of history.